Hello friends, today I am going to start new chapter number 4, Literary Heritage of India. Actually, from this chapter, generally in first test, long question usually comes. So, in that point of view, it is most important chapter to prepare your long questions from this chapter. And in board examination, it is possible that at least 1-2 marks question may come, either 3 marks question and 1 objective type question may come from this chapter, right? So first I want to discuss how the language is started. Usually in the world the sign language was the first. Earlier people were unable to talk by languages, so they were using their sign languages, right? Laterly the languages started to develop, but here you remember that expression of our emotions are only easily possible through the communication, and for that point of view the languages, script, dialect are important. The script means to writing and dialect means to speaking. When both comes together, it becomes language. And as the time was changing from sign language to the language, script and dialect, the world was changing. Language was used, and even today it is used for expression of our words. Through the constructive use of language, we can create extraordinary literature, and indecent use of language, we create the problems. So means use of the language in both the side it is possible, but what is important? How we use our language, right? So literature becomes possible only through constructive use of language, not by negative use. From ancient period to the present period, our Indian literature has vibrantly diverse from one direction to the other direction. Indian scholars, Indian literary people have contributed in different way and created our literature from ancient period to modern period, and in that way literature usually divided in 3 era: ancient era, medieval era and modern era. About ancient period, the literature divided in generally 2 types: Vedic literature and classical literature. Some are including folk literature in list of the ancient literature. So in that way, remember that our literature is varied and multidimensional. Here I want to discuss first about emergence of language and development of literature. So as the various languages have developed, our beginning of the Indian literature starts by Sanskrit literature, because the basic language of our Indian culture is Sanskrit. And from Sanskrit language, our literature started to develop. Okay, in present day, the use of the Sanskrit language is very few. Only in religious ceremonies, worshipping point of view, and rituals, we use the Sanskrit language. But it does not mean that the use of the Sanskrit language is over. Remember, use of the Sanskrit language always exists. As the situation changed, the use of the Sanskrit language only changed. But the existence of Sanskrit language is not over. Maharishi Panini, the great Sanskrit grammarian, had written grammatical book on Sanskrit named as Ashtadhyayi, and it was written in 4th century. This is the one line question, remember. Also, the Sanskrit is considered as language of Aryans, the tribe, language of scholars, language of Sikhs, and at the international level, Sanskrit is considered as language to use for computer also. So it means Sanskrit is chief language for knowledge, science, religion and philosophy. And we cannot deny importance of Sanskrit. Remember this. Okay, here I discussed about importance of Sanskrit language. But now I want to discuss about ancient Indian literature. So when I start to discuss ancient Indian literature, I want to divide the topic in important divisions. First is Vedic literature. You have to keep the list. First is Vedic literature. Second is epics. Third is other Sanskrit literature. Fourth is Buddhist literature. Fifth is literature of Gupta period. And sixth is ancient literature of Dravidian culture. So in that way, our literature always remain varied. And here you have seen the list which I have spoken, very long. And the division of the topic you have to prepare in which way? Name of the book, content of the book, author of the book, or name of the book, author of the book, and content of the book. You, as you make the simple list of it, you can remember the topic, right? Okay. First, I am discussing about the Vedic literature. Okay. In which division the Vedic literature is? First is 4 Vedas. Second is Upanishads. Third is Brahmanical literature. Fourth is Aranyakas. And fifth is Vedangas. The 5 points are included in Vedic literature. Remember this. Okay. First I am talking about the Vedas. So there are 4 Vedas. Now the small question comes. What's the meaning of Vedas? Vedas means knowledge. And the knowledge is divided in 4 parts. First is a Rig Veda. Second one is a Sam Veda. Third one is a Yajur Veda. Fourth one is a Atharva Veda. So remember here that Vedas are divided in 4 parts. Let us discuss first about Rig Veda. It is considered as most ancient book of Indian Sanskrit literature. I repeat, it is considered as most ancient book of Indian literature and in Sanskrit language. It contained with 1028 verses. Verses means the shlokas, mantras, richas. In Sanskrit language, 2 poetic lines are called richa, veda, mantra, right? So Rigveda is divided in 10 divisions. Most of the verses are describing prayer of gods and goddesses, and they are used in the procession of yagnas. When the yagnas are taking place, the richas or the verses or the mantras will be used to recite. As example, one verse is given about goddess of dawn, means morning, Usha, are fascinating. These work describing political, social and religious matters of Aryans. See, this is the importance of Rigveda, is describing so many aspects of Aryan culture. Usually it is spoken that the Vedas have been created or written by Aryans. So it is reflecting Aryan culture. And they were residing in the Sapta Sindhu region, the region of the 7 rivers. We have discussed in the first chapter. So here not it is important, but just I am saying that Rigveda is describing social, political and religious matters of Aryan culture. Okay. Second Veda is Sam Veda. Sam eva Sangita. Music. Veda of music is called Sam Veda. It is focusing on process of a recitation of verses. How to recite is been described in Samveda. Most of the verses have been written here and adapted from Rig Veda. Generally, we use Samveda as Gangotri of music, means most ancient book of music is considered Samveda. Next one is Yajurveda. See, Yajur means yagnas, and yagnas are used to describe our religious rituals, and we use yagnas to perform our religious activity. It composed means Yajurveda is composed with two forms, prose and verses, means poetic way. Describing the hymns means verses, recited at the time of yagnas, means at the time of yagna how to recite the verse is being described, and religious practices, rituals, whichever be there, some verses are used in some different rituals, so it has been described here in Yajurveda. Now the next one is Atharva Veda. So this is the fourth Veda. We have earlier discussed about Rig Veda, Sam Veda and Yajurveda. This is the fourth one, Atharva Veda. It describes various type of rituals and sanskaras. There are 16 types of sanskaras in our religion and in our culture has been described. Now, I am talking about Upanishads. Upanishad is philosophical literature describing and do the analysis of how the universe developed, mystical detail of life and death, materialistic and spiritual world. See, all these things are philosophical aspects. Sometimes it is considered as the scientific aspect as by the emergence of earth. The earliest Upanishads are Brihadaranya and Chandogya. I repeat, Brihadaranya and Chandogya are two earliest Upanishads. Means it was written in the beginning period when the Upanishads started to write, and it was described in the dialogue form. There are 108 as mentioned in Mauktikopanishad. It is also one kind of Upanishad. Now I am discussing about Brahminical literature. See, Brahminical literature is considered to be used to understand meaning of Vedic literature. So to describing in easy manner the Vedic literature is given in Brahminical literature. Many critics are composing their poetic detail on base of Brahminical literature, and in Brahminical literature also the Vedas have been described in the poetic way. So here remember, Brahminical literature in the poetic way, The Upanishads in the earlier form was in the dialogue. So there are different way of the expression is used in all these Sanskrit literature. The Vedic literature and directive principles regarding behavior for every human have to do is being explained in detail in Brahmanical literature. Now I am discussing about the Aranyakas. Aranya means forest. When the person reached to his more than 50 years age, he decided to go to the forest to spend his last phase of life, and Aryans started to live in this way. So they established their ashramas in forest. Here they stayed and wrote or composed literature in the philosophical aspect. So it means Aranyakas means literature written by Aryans in their last period of life by sitting in the ashrams established in the forest region. So it is called Aranyakas. So here it is possible to ask for 2 marks. Now the last topic of the Vedic literature is Vedangas. Vedangas literature deals with religious practices, rituals, grammar, astronomy. Astronomy means study of the celestial object, and astrology means study of the effect of the celestial object on the human life is been described in the astrology. So the science, literature, everything is included in Vedangas. So here I discussed about Vedic literature. Now I want to discuss about epics. India's 2 epics are most popular and important. That is Ramayana and Mahabharata. Now you remember, Mahabharata is not a single work but includes the other part of the work is the book of Srimad Bhagavad Gita, the philosophical book. Okay, let us first discuss about Ramayana. Remember, both Ramayana and Mahabharata both are considered as great Indian epics. The present form of both the epics has been traced by not earlier than 2nd century. It means that both the epics earlier written by humans and later it was reconstructed. So here when I am talking about the Ramayana, it was written mainly in Sanskrit by Valmiki and has been described story of Lord Ramachandra, the king of Ayodhya. If we compare Ramayana and Mahabharata, both are different in comparison. Even in the size, Ramayana is smaller epic than Mahabharata. It does not mean that the Ramayana is only written by the Valmiki, but in different languages also Ramayana has been described. So remember, some books has more popularity, So it will be described in more than one languages. Every language has described their Ramayana in their own way, but ultimately the central idea is same. The war between Ram and Ravana has been discussed in this book, and the story of the life sketch of Lord Ramachandra has been discussed. Okay, now Mahabharata, it is world's greatest, largest epic. More than 1 lakh verses, verses means mantras or riches, have been described in Mahabharata. Mainly, the war between Kauravas and Pandavas. The war between Kauravas and Pandavas has been described in the Mahabharata, and it largely impacted over the life of the people. Lots of the stories are included in Mahabharata. Even I told you just before the Srimad Bhagavad Gita, it's a part of Mahabharata. Okay, but it's a different work also. It is describing philosophical principles. Give us message of achieving moksha. Moksha means salvation or nirvana through Jnana, karma and bhakti is being described here. So this is the second part of the ancient Indian literature. First I discussed about Vedic literature. Second I here discussed about Ramayana and Mahabharata, the epics. Now I am describing about Buddhist literature. So as I want to discuss about Buddhist literature, remember one thing. Most of the Buddhist literature was written in the Pali script. The important Buddhist literature is Tripitaka. Pitaka means bunch. Tri means three. Three bunches of knowledge means Tripitaka. Sukta Pitaka, Vinaya Pitaka and Abhidhamma Pitaka. These are three main works of Buddhist literature. Here in your book the detail is not given, but even Buddha Charita is also written in Sanskrit. Means Sanskrit exists from earlier to the present, but only the uses and explanation of the Sanskrit has been changed, nothing else. Right, my friends? So here I discussed with you today about Buddhist literature. Earlier I discussed about epics, and before that I discussed about Vedic literature. Means here we started to discuss today about complete study of ancient Indian literature. Right, my friends?